Good morning again. I'm Laura Benson, and I am so pleased to welcome you to our annual meeting on this brilliant fall day. It is good to be among friends, longtime advocates, and newcomers to the movement alike. As at most annual meetings, we will keep the mission of Durham's Partnership for Children front and center in all that we do this morning. We are proud to tell the story of our past year, and you'll see that encapsulated in all of the materials, and especially in the annual report that's at your seat. But this morning, rather than just touting the accomplishments that we can see in our rearview mirror, we're asking you to look forward with us. We want you to gaze ahead at a wide horizon through the windshield and to see all the work that is waiting for us to do together. That's why we've invited Dr. Duggar as our keynote speaker this morning. He will set the national stage, and that's why we've invited an esteemed panel of local leaders to bring us right back home to our own community in Durham. This is not simply a time for pleasantries and recognition, although we will do a little of that. We are not simply fulfilling our bylaws mandate to hold an annual meeting. Rather, we're bringing together stakeholders and drawing new players to the table at the same time to focus on the necessity of early childhood investment. So are you in? If you're not yet, I guarantee you will be. This is your invitation to come in, join in, jump in, and be in. I now invite Bill Bryant and Bill Shore to our stage. Bill Bryant is our board chair extraordinaire. Bill and his wife Karen have lived and worked in Durham for 16 years. Bill got involved with the partnership more than 9 years ago when their children were in preschool. Bill is the president of Bryant Investment Management Group, and we are fortunate to have his leadership at the partnership, and Durham is lucky to have him as one of our quiet, steadfast visionaries. Bill and Bill.
Thank you, Laura, for that wonderful introduction. On behalf of Durham's Partnership for Children's Board of Directors, I welcome all of you to today's meeting. I welcome our current, former, and future board members and chairs. I welcome our local and state elected officials, and I want to thank our annual meeting sponsors. At the silver level, we have the Duke University Office of Durham and Regional Affairs. At the bronze level, Robert Half and Associates in the United Way of the Greater Triangle. And our in-kind and contributing sponsors are Mechanics and Farmers Bank, American Tobacco, Corelli Party Rentals, and the King's Daughters Inn. I'm in. 9 years ago, when my children were still in preschool, I was informed about the partnership and the important work that they do in Durham County. I was informed about the statewide efforts of Smart Start, and soon, armed with all of that information, I became involved because I saw firsthand how important it was for young children to develop and grow in a nurturing environment, one that builds their foundation for lifelong learning and success. I know you've probably all heard this before, but if you're building a house and the foundation is not sound, you can fix it, but it's sure going to cost a lot more than if you'd done it right the first time. I became involved because as a business owner, as a resident, and as a father, I care about the community where I work, where I live, and where I raise my children. I want every child to be ready to learn when they enter school, but I also want a good return on my investment of time, on my commitment of resources, on my expenditure of effort. My opinion 9 years ago and now is that there's no better place to dedicate ourselves to improving this community than right here, right now, and with these children. I'm invested in this cause, our cause of creating a bright future for all of us. I'm committed to making this community a place in which all of us invest in young children, in which all of us invest in our future. Today, in my official role as the board chair of the partnership and as a Durham community resident and local business owner, I'm asking each of you, are you in? Join me and get informed, and get involved, and be invested. To give you many more reasons why you should be in, we've invited Dr. Robert Duggar to be our keynote speaker at our annual meeting today. But right now, I'm more than pleased to introduce you to Mr. Bill Shore, one of Durham's finest and strongest business leaders, a lifelong Durham resident who is best known to all of us as the one who headed GSK's corporate giving for 27 years. Thank you, Bill, for being with us today.
Bill, thank you very much. I did retire after 27 years at GSK about 7 months ago, and I just could not outrun Laura Benson. She is unbelievable. She will find you on the golf course, I promise you that. It's just been, and I basically retired just to get away from fair win. And that didn't work either. It is my privilege today to be able to have the honor of introducing Dr. Duggar. I grew up here in Durham. My granddad worked here. My grandmother at the Golden Belt. My dad was the pharmacist at Eckerd's on Main Street. My first job out of college in 1971, I'd just gotten married, and you couldn't find a job in 1971, at least I couldn't. I collected life insurance for Pilot Life Insurance Company in East Durham for about 7 or 8 months. And I remember pulling into the Hoover Road housing project, and I was obviously a very idealistic, 22-year-old, I guess, and sitting on a trash dumpster with 2 little 5-year-old little boys. And it hit me right between the eyes that they were born in the Hoover Road housing project. They could have been born somewhere else, and they would not have been sitting on a trash dumpster. I don't know what happened to those two little boys, but that image stuck with me. And so to have been involved in a job like I've had over a number of years, to be able to be involved with nonprofits and be involved in the kind of efforts like are going on in this room, keeps those kids, I hope, off those trash dumpsters. And that's why I continue to be involved in the East Durham Children's Initiative. That's why I'm not all that hard to find with Laura, because I believe in this effort so much. And when you have somebody like Governor Hunt that you've been fortunate to work with, you do drink the Kool-Aid when it comes to this kind of effort. So from a lot of aspects, I'm very happy to be here this morning and to be able to introduce Dr. Duggar. We're very lucky to have him. I've been involved on the kind of the national level of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and everybody knows Rob Duggar. He's the founder and managing partner of Hanover Investment Group, a firm specializing in helping business and government clients navigate significant changes in physical conditions. His previous experience includes serving as a partner in Tudor Investment Corporation and as a policy director at the American Bankers Association. He began his career at the Federal Reserve Board of Governors and served as a senior staff member of both the House Financial Services Committee and the Senate Banking Committee in the 1980s. Dr. Duggar is a founder of Ready Nation and chairman of the Invest in Kids Working Group. In his home state of Virginia, Dr. Duggar is a board member of Smart Beginnings, a member of Governor Kane's Strong Start Pre-Kindergarten Council. He's co-chair of the Governor Warner's Virginia Early Learning Council and a founding member of the Alexandria Community Trust. Rob received a Bachelor of Arts from Davidson College, and then he improved his education by getting his PhD at UNC Chapel Hill, where he's now officially a Tar Heel. And as chairman of the Ready Nation Advisory Board, Dr. Duggar is committed to making the successful development of children the top economic priority of this nation. His key strategy is mobilizing the business community to improve tomorrow's economy through smart policy investments in young children today. Ready Nation aligns with national, professional, and industry organizations like the Institute for Competitive Workforce at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Pew Center on the States. It is my privilege to welcome to Durham and to welcome to the podium Dr. Robert Duggar.
Good morning. I want to thank everybody involved with this wonderful effort here in Durham. As was mentioned, I spent a few years in North Carolina. what Bill Bryant and Laura are doing, what the Durham Partnership is doing, the Greater Durham Chamber of Commerce, Duke University, and even the North Carolina Partnership with its 77 components, all of you and all of you across the state are doing the most important work in the state, and given the legacy of North Carolina, some of the most important work in the United States. What you did in those early years with Governor Hunt is truly historic. And what was done here in the Research Triangle is truly historic. It showed how you can combine development and human capital development in a competitive powerhouse. Mike Goodman's dad, I'm told, upset the Durham Chamber of Commerce when he one time addressed the board and said, you got to stop thinking about Durham or Greater Durham. You've got to think about the triangle. And that's what we need to do here, obviously, but what we need to do across the country. We've got to think about the United States, and we need to think about the United States in human capital terms. Now, let me go to this is your mission statement, as I read it. As I read it and thought about coming here, I don't know why, but I came into mind the image of Kasha. Kasha's about 3, almost 4. She's sitting at a table in a preschool, and she's coloring furiously. She's got her papers, and she's coloring, and she's got some other kids, and they're coloring like mad, and the teacher comes over and says, Kasha, what are you drawing? And Kasha says, well, I'm drawing a picture of God. The teacher says, Kasha, no one knows what God looks like. And Kasha says, well, they will in a minute. Isn't that what we want every young adult to be like? Absolutely confident, creative, and persistent, able to work, thinking about others. Their others are going to know what God looks like when I'm done. Now, across the table is Michael, and he's drawing furiously, and he's doing the same thing, and what's going to happen is around that table, all those kids are going to compare pictures of God. And you got to admit, that's a fairly ambitious intellectual undertaking for some 3- and 4-year-olds. And what they're going to learn is every one of those pictures is different. And that in the course of looking at those pictures, every one of them is going to have a better understanding of what God looks like. This is your mission statement, and the question is, why do you do it? You do it because you believe in the social justice of it. You believe that providing an early education, early care, proper care, yields individuals which are able to access their inalienable rights. You do it because you want to produce a new generation of competitive employees. And you do it, as it says, in the first 5 years. You focus on those early years. I read your annual report, and I can see in it that the emphasis is education. The key is education. So what we know is that, and I have to take a second, Kelly, I'm going to change the gesture because I do this all the time, and so I don't want you to go on every slide every time I do this. So what I want you to do is I'll just do it with this hand to move the next slide, and this hand when I'm talking. So watch this hand. America used to be number one. But now we're just average. Here's the problem. Durham County is spending less. You are part of this national drift towards average. Here's the problem. It's not so much that here in Durham or in the United States generally that we have done a much, much worse job educating kids, generating the next workforce. It's that the others are doing so much better job. In my previous work, I traveled all around the world as a hedge fund partner. There isn't a central bank or a legislature or a finance ministry of importance that I haven't walked the halls and talked to people. And what I found is around the world, everybody was focusing on education, focusing on making their workforces the most competitive in the world. As they did better, and as we lost our priority in education, we end up with this chart in which we're losing competitiveness. Our young adults are losing competitiveness. Now, it happens that at the very time we're losing competitiveness, the value of an educated young adult, the economic value of an educated young adult, is going up. We have an aging population. We have businesses and economic activity that is more complex, requires higher education levels. So those educated 18-year-olds, educated 22-year-olds, their economic value is rising. And then we end up with our problem. We can see the lines crossing. We have to take steps which address this problem, and we can ask the question, who produces educated young adults? Now, all of you, if I hand you a microphone, can tell me about the auto sector. If I hand you a microphone and ask you about the financial sector, you can all get up and say a few words about it. You can say about the auto sector, they produce cars, they maintain them. You can tell me about the financial sector. I probably don't want to hear it as a recovering hedge fund partner. You probably don't have much positive things to say about the financial sector. A few of you do. But there are a lot of complaints. But who produces young adults? Who produces the young adults that we need for the future of this economy? It's the youth human capital sector. How big is it? The auto sector is 3% of GDP. Pretty big. The financial sector is 7 or 8% of GDP, even bigger. The youth human capital sector is 10% of GDP. The part of the economy that produces young adults, like the other parts of the economy produce cars, or financial services, or the food on that table back there, those sectors are small in comparison to all the goods and services and time and commitment that's put into raising kids to age 18. Prenatal to age 18, as we'll discover in a moment, in detail, is over 10% of GDP. To produce globally competitive young adults, you must first produce ready-for-school young adults, young children. You can't get the one without the other. This is Jim Heckman's famous chart. Jim Heckman is a friend of mine. We're in contact every day. This chart describes the return at different levels of age. Let's just go flip through them. Each one, the return for $100,000 or $100 million or $1 billion invested at different points in their lives, the return steadily declines. For what is this sector? It's all the money that is spent by parents and providers of everything from safety seats to clothes to books, chairs, tables, crayons, Legos, everything. That sector that produces school-ready young adults is 3% of GDP. It's very big. Just in the Durham area, it's big. $64 million annually and over about 2,000 employees. And that's just the portion that's involved in education. This does not include all the bus drivers, all the mechanics, the people who provide computer services, chairs, clothes, food. This is just the portion that you now count as the early care and education sector. That's actually a relatively small part of the economic sector, the total economic sector that's involved in getting a kid to school. It includes everything from obstetrics to pre-kindergarten, and everyone that's involved in it. This early childhood sector is so big that its productivity affects an economy. Let's go to the next slide. Tim Bartik at the Upjohn Institute has documented why investing in early child raises regional per capita income. It's why really thoughtful, far-sighted businessmen invest in, and why they make it a priority to invest in kids from conception to age 5. What Tim Bartik did, it took 4 years to write this book. But what he did is he took the findings that we had generated first at the Invest in Kids Working Group and then the Partnership for America's Economic Success that related to the microeconomic returns, that is, returns on specific programs, say interventions for prenatal months, kindergarten, 0 to 3, those kinds of things, microeconomics, and then you aggregate them up to what are the regional economic effects. He calculated what it means when you do this right. We went on to do the third area was sector definition, which we talked about a moment ago. We'll talk in a few minutes about finance and then advocacy. Those are the 5 areas of research, and this was the product of the second area where we pulled together all the findings of microeconomic returns and applied them to regions and the country. I co-chair an organization called Ready Nation, which I'll talk to you about now. Ready Nation, let's go to the next slide. Our mission is to build coalitions, business coalitions in every state. We have a goal of at least 50 people in every state, 50 business people in every state who are thoroughly knowledgeable and thoroughly strong advocates for spending, for investment in early childhood, conception to kindergarten. Our goal is to make the American workforce the most competitive in the world, to get our economy back on its feet economically, and to regain fiscal sustainability. We do this in lots of ways. And Kelly, you should just go ahead and flip these. These are the things we do. We build coalitions, we do research, we hold seminars, we speak around the country. We have a category of, a list of speakers like myself. In fact, many of them are much more dynamic and know many more jokes than I do. We help business leaders take action. Editorials, advocacy. In the 2011-2010 period, 4,300 business people contacted policymakers as a result of efforts of Ready Nation and Ready Nation partners. We are active all across the country. And as a result, we had increases we defended spending in Virginia and actually increased it. Increased it in New Mexico, increased it in Colorado, increased it in Pennsylvania, and over the United States, increased funding for children 38% and general funding 72%. Now, one of the most exciting areas of work arises from this fact. All of you know, because you've read all of Jim Heckman's work, you've read all of Art Royalnick's work, you know that the investing in kids prenatal to 5 yields $10 for every $1, et cetera, et cetera. But what you may not know, I thought I'd turn this off, but I haven't. What you may not know is that investing in kids very early has immediate payoffs. It happens, and we're about to show this conclusively, that quality prenatal care can cut postpartum medical costs enough to pay for the care in the first place and pay back investors their money plus a good return. These are this pay for success social impact bond finance ideas applied to early health. Now, any region that wants to do this has to have some really good medical schools nearby. It turns out that early education has the same impact, and this we've virtually conclusively proven now, is that quality 3-year-old, 4-year-old pre-kindergarten reduces special education, grade retention, and English language learner costs enough to pay back the people who pay for the services in the first place, pay their bonds back, and pay them a competitive return. And what we're now learning is that the application of these programs generates a surplus that over a period of 3 or 4 or 5 years, you don't need to borrow any money at all. In other words, the public school systems are generating such large amounts of savings from the reductions in special ed, grade retention, and English language learner costs that the ability to finance the provision of quality pre-kindergarten for 3 and 4-year-olds is a sustainable activity, can continue for years until you run out of kids who need these special services. Now, if you want to know more about pay for success, social impact finance, you follow those instructions. Now, I want to add a little bit to these instructions. Social impact finance is a very new field, and it has to be carefully thought about. We are pursuing it at Ready Nation because what we find is that lots of businessmen are prepared to write an op-ed. You can give them the basic text, they'll write it in their own words and submit it to the local newspaper. And on any particular funding or business or your legislative activity, you can get a group of businessmen to write a letter to their congressman or give a call or something like that. But they feel inherently incomplete. I know this as a business person. There's got to be something more I can do. And there's something more that they can do is to organize these pay-for-success capital partnerships. These enable businessmen to take concrete action. So I encourage you to go to the website. In fact, I need you to go to the website. And I need you to sign up at the listserv, and I need you to take the Ready Nation Pledge. I think this is the, yes. Let's go to the next slide. I need you to go, let's go back to the other slide, if you don't mind. I'm still learning this speech. Need you to go to the website, sign up for the listserv, and sign the pledge. If you sign the pledge, you'll be joining 800, 900, upwards of 1,000 other people, and you'll find yourself in the company of a couple of billionaires. Paul Jones, George Kaiser, and other names you will recognize. This pledge is a pledge that you support conception to kindergarten spending/investment, and that you will act on it for the benefit of kids. Building this pledge list enables us to convince business people that more and more people are buying into this. So signing that pledge helps you and it helps us. Obviously, use all our materials, but you do that already. I've had a number of people comment already that a lot of use is made of what the information we have on Ready Nation. But I feel a little bit awkward this morning. I feel that in talking to you this morning, I've sort of been tied to this PowerPoint. And I generally don't like PowerPoints because they require you to go through a very kind of rigid presentation process, but I'm told I have to do this because there's a certain amount of information that has to be gotten across. But I'll tell you, what's on my mind right now is that in this room, there are people who may not think that what's happening to this country economically and in our fiscal policy is going to be settled quickly. Let me ask, for the hands of people who think that we're going to solve our economic and fiscal problems within the next year or so. How many of you think it's going to be difficult and will take a lot of years? Raise your hand. If you think it's going to be difficult and it's going to take a lot of years, you probably are thinking that this fight for resources for kids is going to take on a fairly serious tone at some point in the future. How many of you think that's true? Raise your hands. How many of you have a Kids First license plate? 1, 2, 3. How many of you think in terms of Democrat, Republican, or Kids First? None of you. If I ask for how many of you think in terms of Republican politics or Democratic politics, I'll get every hand in the room. But we need a new kind of politics. A politics that is not about Republicans, not about Democrats, but is about putting kids first. And just as you may have a Romney sticker or an Obama sticker on your car, we need to have a Kids First sticker on our cars. We need to be saying to Republicans and Democrats alike, vote for kids. You'll get North Carolina back on its feet economically. You will make sure it is fiscally sustainable, and your example will be an example to the rest of the country. We absolutely have to be able to say to every member of the House and Senate of these legislatures, of these states, gentlemen and ladies, many of you have been in office many years. You're basically not qualified to do anything else but what you're doing right now. And what we want you to know is if you don't vote for Kids First, you're going to have to find a new line of work. A new line of work. Whether Republican or Democrat, vote Kids First or find something else to do. Because that's the way our country has to go. We absolutely have to find a path that puts this next generation first in everything we do. This next picture, this next slide, no, don't go back, go forward. Keep going. Well, at the end, this is what we need to achieve. We need to have it in our minds that the long term is about the near term. And I think that it would be a great help to us in Virginia if we could report that one of our most serious competitors, economic competitors, North Carolina, was buying Kids First license plates like there's no tomorrow. That is absolutely creating and pushing a politics of putting kids first. So I'm going to stop there and thank you. I love this annual report. I love everything you're doing. Keep it up.
Will you stay here with me for just a moment?
Sure.
Well, thank you, Dr. Duggar. It's been a privilege to be with you both last night in conversation and this morning in this venue to really be compelled by the economic argument, which I think we know here in our audience this morning. We have business leaders, child care providers, early care educators, our own funded partners, and those representatives of institutions with whom we deeply collaborate. So you have a crowd who's right there with you, but we need help to frame that conversation and to understand from an economic perspective how we can be more forceful leaders in our community. What I'd like to ask you, obviously many business leaders agree about this, but I noticed we don't have a Ready Nation star on the North Carolina map, for example. So how do we move the business community's support to the next level? And are there things that you could specifically recommend to us here in North Carolina beyond buying Kids First license plates? You've talked about our responsibility as voters and carrying that message to our elected officials. What else could you help us think about in terms of concrete ways that we can bring our community to the next level from the business perspective?
Well, obviously, these are terrific questions, Laura. One of the problems North Carolina has is that it's been so successful. Wonderful university system, wonderful research system, massive government spending, particularly in defense. It's been an enormous beneficiary of everything the government has done. It's been an enormous beneficiary of really smart policies that Jim Hunt and others put into place. But times are changing. And it is from my experience in speaking all over the country, in the last few weeks I've been in 5 states, speaking to groups like this. There's a connectivity between what you are doing as providers and what the business community is doing as it searches through how do we, as businessmen think, how do they get through the next few years? Because they all know, as well as any of us knows. I'll say it, as a businessman, I know the next few years are going to be tough. So there's a connectivity between what providers are doing and people in the early care sector are doing and what business sees and thinks about. And then if it were to happen that in the newspapers across North Carolina there were reports about buying these Kids First license plates at the encouragement of the North Carolina Partnership for Children, or the Greater Durham, the Durham Partnership for Children. That would get reported. And what businessmen know is they have to be on the right side of their customers. They have to They want to be regarded as part of the solution, not part of the problem. And so businesses want to be thought of as kids first also. That's why they write the op-eds. That's why they contact legislators. The more far-sighted ones understand that human capital is the key to business. It's the key to economics. Young adults, you can't imagine an economy without young adults. So business people understand this, and so there's a sort of unclear to me and connectivity between what you do in the early care sector and how the business sector responds. Yes, you can explain to them the economic returns, higher, better performing schools, higher graduation rates and all that, but that's very long term. We're making breakthroughs in early health and early learning social impact finance, pay for success finance, and I encourage you to go to the Ready Nation website and read the paper on Pixie bonds. It is tough stuff, 81 pages. And we'll explain to you how if you you can set up a program with business people and philanthropists to provide 3-year-old, 4-year-old pre-kindergarten, and it immediately, in the first year, reduces special education costs, and then over a couple of years reduces grade retention, and immediately reduces English language learner costs. And all the teachers will tell you, it is such a relief to be in classrooms now where I don't have to teach such a wide array of skills, kids with skills. All of them are ready to learn. Well, in this environment, you make the schools more productive. Business people understand this, but you have to understand it first. And if you don't, you can't make the case. So as tough as things have been, and as much as you've been asked to do, you've got to do more. Now, question, is this the first time as a country we've had these kinds of challenges? Let me take a second. Laura, I'm going to take this second if you don't mind. All of you know about government budgets. And you talk about them as if they're money all the time. But government budgets are not about money. Not really. Government budgets are architectures of the civil commitments that we have made to each other over many generations. They tell us who's going to take care of us in the event of a fire, police situations, food safety, national defense. That's what that budget architecture provides. When we say there's a budget crisis, we're not saying it's a crisis because there's a shortage of money. We're saying it's a crisis because the fabric of commitments that holds the society together is being torn apart. People don't know what their relationship to each other is. Who's going to teach kids? Who's going to take care of us if there's a fire? Within the civil crisis, there are budget advantaged and budget disadvantaged. We all know this. There's a kind of gap, and we know this gap has to be closed. Have there been civil gaps in the past that we can look at to get an idea about how America solves problems like this? Yes, there are. There have been 4 of them. The first one was the American Revolution. The civil gap between British citizens and American citizens. We solved that one. There was a civil gap between free and slave, and we closed that one. There was a gap between women and men in voting. We closed that one. There was a gap between access to equal education and access to public facilities, and we closed that one in the 1950s and 1960s. Now, this coming gap is a gap between, so to speak, the next generation and the current generation, because we're living very well on the expectation that we're going to reach out and take their labor through their taxes to pay for our living standards now. That gap has to be closed. In that struggle over resources, those of us who understand that empowering children is a civil rights matter as well as an economic matter, and if you didn't buy into the civil rights matter, that if you did not provide Michael or Kasha the opportunity to be ready for school, you would effectively reduce their capacity to access their inalienable rights under the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. If you didn't buy that argument, you at least bought the argument that it made good economic sense. Now, in this struggle, you all are going to have to really step up, just like Americans in the past stepped up for the fight. So you have to go and read and understand why it is that when you provide quality counseling to an expectant mother, premature birth rates fall. How much does it cost to deliver a preemie in the first year? $45,000. How much is an average birth? About $4,500. You don't have to have many of those full-term births to pay for the provision of those prenatal services.